Now I would like to invite Mr. Mahmoud Jardaneh, Department of Energy Attaché, Embassy of the United States of America, to present the special address. He is responsible for advancing DOE's energy, science, and nuclear safety, security, and non-proliferation engagements in India. Prior to joining the U.S. Department of Energy, he held various positions at the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, including reactor operations, engineer, chief of staff, international relations officer, structural engineer, and Mansfield Fellow in Japan.
Good morning. What an honor to be on the stage with such distinguished individuals here. And it's an honor to be invited by Chemtech and by Mr. Mathur to represent the US government and the US Department of Energy at this event. If you recall, last week, President Trump visited India for the first time, and that's an indication to the importance of the relationship between the United States and India. President Trump, if you notice, does not travel internationally a lot, contrary to other presidents in prior administrations. But to highlight the importance of the relationship, the energy cooperation between the US and India, one of the very few senior officials from the US government who joined the delegation was Secretary of Energy of the United States, Mr. Dan Brouillette. Mr. Dan Brouillette arrived a few hours before the president arrived in India, and upon his arrival, within 1 hour, he had a meeting with Minister Pradhan, and he had a round table with industry, US and international industry and Indian industry in India, working in the gas sector and broadly the energy sector. And that just to highlight the importance of the relationship between the two countries. And I'm very honored here to be today to present on the globalization of the US natural gas market. As you know, the shale revolution has propelled the US to become the world's largest producer of both crude oil and natural gas. The US became a net exporter of natural gas, LNG, in 2017. The US is now the global producer of both crude oil and natural gas, with current estimates of crude oil production 13 million barrels per day, and production of dry natural gas estimated 95 billion cubic feet per day. Just for easy conversion, if you're more familiar with the metric system, when we convert from cubic feet to cubic meters, so if I say 95 million cubic feet per day, to convert it to metric, just multiply by 10, and that would give you the number in a year. So 95 billion cubic feet per day would be equal 950 cubic meter annual per year. Since in this presentation, I'll be going back and forth, but just in case you understand one more than the other. The high production rates are expected to continue in the United States. Projections for the year 2040 from the Energy Information Administration show crude oil production will reach 14 million barrels per day, while natural gas productions will reach over 116 billion cubic feet per day, or 1,186 billion cubic meters a year by the year 2040. These ample supplies available to help to meet the global demand for natural gas and oil. As of 2020, the US natural gas export capacity is nearly 8 billion cubic feet per day, putting the US among the top 3 liquefied natural gas exporter in the world. The expected continued strength of US production will outpace domestic consumption, as shown in the diagram. For the long projections from the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, as far as the projection go by the year 2050. So if you notice, the blue line is the gas production, and the green line is the consumption in the United States. And around the year 2017, where our production has exceeded our consumption. The global consumption is projected also to increase by more than 40% by the year 2050. And the total consumption could reach nearly 200 quadrillion British thermal units by the year 2050. Natural gas use is expected to increase the most in countries outside of OECD. India is outside of the OECD. To meet demand for increased industrial activity, natural gas-fired electricity generation, as well as transportation fueled by liquefied natural gas. Natural gas consumption in non-OECD countries is projected to increase by about 70 quadrillion BTU in 2018 to 120 quadrillion BTU by the year 2050. That's a 70% increase. During this time, non-OECD countries' share of global natural gas consumption could increase from 50% to over 60%. Now I'll shift a little bit domestically to see where the production of natural gas in the United States and LNG terminals. As you can see from this map, most US LNG export projects are concentrated in the southern side of the United States on the Gulf of Mexico. With only 2 projects on the East Coast, there are also 2 projects proposed on the West Coast. Now there are 6 projects which appear in orange on the map that are operating with export capacity of 8 billion cubic feet per day, or 80 billion cubic meters a year. 2 more projects, which appear in blue, are under construction and plan to be online in the next few years. 5 of the 6 operating facilities in the United States are going expansion. Once the projects under construction are complete, the US expects to have over 15.5 billion cubic feet per day, or 158 billion cubic meters per year of export capacity, positioning the United States to be the top global exporter of liquefied natural gas. 11 additional large-scale US projects, which appear in green on the map, are approved but are awaiting final investment decisions. Additionally, the projects that appear in red are proposed to be sited, including 2 on the West Coast and 1 in the Gulf of Mexico, and are awaiting regulatory approvals to be issued by the end of this year. In total, the US Department of Energy has authorized a cumulative volume of over 44.8 billion cubic feet per day, or 457 billion cubic meters of natural gas exports to anywhere in the world that is not prohibited by the US law or policy. These authorizations are primarily spread across the 18 large-scale US projects shown on the previous slide, and also here with the amounts for each of the projects. If you notice, the green bars are the amount of export capacity currently online and exporting. The purple shows the capacity under construction, and the blue bars show the capacity approved but not under construction as of today. Now let me turn to the regulatory process for siting and export of natural gas in the United States. The Department of Energy is one of 3 main federal agencies in charge of various aspects of LNG regulation. The other 2 organizations are the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which probably is equivalent to the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board in India, and the 3rd organization is the Department of Transportation Maritime Administration. The Department of Energy authorizes the import and export of natural gas. FERC oversees onshore LNG terminals, and MARAD, the Department of Transportation Maritime Administration, has the authority over deepwater LNG facilities through the preparation of environmental impact statements for the application of built LNG facilities. Typically, LNG applicants file with the Department of Energy and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission at the same time. The environmental review by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and MARAD takes approximately 2 to 3 years for licensing, while the Department of Energy takes the final action on LNG application once the FERC-MARAD review has been complete. To turn to DOE's role over natural LNG exports, let me provide you an overview of the regulatory framework. The DOE authority to regulate the import and export of natural gas arises under Section 3 of the United States Natural Gas Act. The Natural Gas Act, as amended, requires that any person or company seeking to import or export natural gas from the United States to first obtain an authorization from the Department of Energy. For countries that have a free trade agreement with the United States, the federal law requires the approval. So the approval is required for countries that are have an FTA with the United States. For countries that do not have a free trade agreement with the United States, the Natural Gas Act directs the Department of Energy to make a determination that the proposed export is consistent with the policy interests, except where such trade is explicitly prohibited by the US policy. Currently, the United States does not allow export of liquefied natural gas or petroleum products to 3 countries, including Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. The Department of Energy's interest review includes comments from the general public filed in response to the application. The export authorization is not country-specific, but rather blank authorization to either or FTA free trade agreement countries or non-free trade agreement countries. Although the Department of Energy determines whether to issue a company the natural gas to import or export authorization, the Department of Energy or the US government does not get involved in the commercial transaction or determine the destinations or buyers of natural gas, especially for liquefied natural gas. The list here shows some of the factors considered by the Department of Energy when evaluating if a non-free trade agreement country can gas be exported to it. It's in the public interest. Note that the need of the supply and many impacts and the impact on the economy, among other factors, are evaluated. Now, looking into the future, these projects on the slide are still awaiting review by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Department of Energy. With the projects on the top box, Alaska, Jordan, and Commonwealth, are expected to complete the federal regulatory review by the end of this year. And the projects at the bottom box are still in the pre-filing requirement with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Since the United States began exporting LNG from the continental US, more than 3.5 trillion cubic feet, or over 100 billion metric cubic meters of natural gas has been exported as LNG to 38 destinations on 5 continents. Through the end of 2019, South Korea was the largest importer of US LNG, followed by Japan, Spain, Mexico, and France. While over 36% of exports have gone to the Asia-Pacific region over the 3+ years of US export, Europe was the top destination for the US export of LNG in 2019. India accounted for 5% of the US LNG exports, totaling 187 billion cubic feet. And while the US supports diversity of natural gas supply and supply routes, we also see promise in many application of LNG back at home and here in India. While today LNG in the US is primarily used to generate electricity for cooking and to heat homes and businesses, it can also be used as a great source for clean fuel for ships and heavy-duty vehicles. It can also be sent via containers or trucks or rails to areas that are not connected to the grid by pipeline grid, which are promising uses of LNG that I know are being looked at here in India. And I would be remiss if I don't highlight the US-India Strategic Energy Partnership, and under it, the US-India Gas Task Force, where many of the US industry and US and Indian companies are participating in it to provide recommendation in order to harmonize the regulation and markets between the US and India in order to develop infrastructure as well as demand growth in India. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I had the pleasure of working with you.
I now request our guests on the dais to release the exhibitors directory. Sujata, Sujata, Sujata. Brenda. Can we have a group photograph with the exhibitor directories in hands? Can we request you for a group photo, sir, with your directories in your hands? A group photo? Yeah. Yes. Thank you, sir. So now, I would like to now invite Mr. Rakesh Verma, the Chief Executive Officer and whole-time Director of Simon India Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of the renowned Advance Group, KK Birla Group, which is a world-class EPC company in the field of fertilizers, chemicals, petrochemicals, oil and gas, cement and infrastructure projects. Mr. Verma is a mechanical engineer from IIT Roorkee and a certified project management professional from PMI Houston. He comes with more than 38 years of rich and varied experience with a strong background in working for large corporate organizations. Now I would like to invite Mr. Verma to propose the vote of thanks.
Good morning. Maulik is not here, but I want to congratulate him first that for such a nice event which benefits all of us. As far as this GASTech event is concerned, the topic is unlocking natural gas value chain potential. This is truly very apt topic for the current situation, wherein Mr. Sarraf gave, Rajeev gave data that 6% is the only usage, Mr. Sarraf said that, in India, if you compare the fuels, and 4% is the value. So we have a very large potential to bridge the gap. We have a lot to do in the gas, not only from the government perspective, the policies, but also from its economic benefits, which Mr. Sarraf was giving. So, and what can be the best or better people on the dais for that is, we had Mr. Sarraf, who is top leadership of regulatory authority. We have GAIL, Mr. Rajeev Mathur, the top leadership, who are operators. We have people around us who are producers, ONGC, Director Onshore, and Oil India, Director Operations. So, I mean, this conference has become a complete value chain in itself. And the users also, rather we are the users of the gas, as in our 4 fertilizer plants, we are using the gas only. Now we have converted everything gas-based. So this is a real, we should take advantage of these kind of events to unlock this value chain. The kind of gathering you're seeing, the 2 inaugural sessions are going parallel, and there is a full attendance. That itself shows that these are so beneficial for all of us, for the industry, for the business, that it is picking up every year. From last year, this is more improved. So I want to thank Mr. Rajeev Mathur, who has really given his continuous efforts and guidance as advisory board chairman for the GASTech. And being the member, I have seen of the board, I have seen that efforts and enthusiasm and the kind of leadership he has given. Mr. Sarraf is left. I want to thank him for his, he has given a lot of ideas on and the numbers on which the government is working, and CNG, this LNG terminals which are coming up, these are going to help our industry. A lot of LNG, PNG and CNG was, and city gas was talked about Mr. Rajeev Mathur. And this is the inside perspective of this industry. I would like to add one thing to that also, that Pradhan Mantri's Ujjwala Yojana, LPG, which is for the rural areas for a temporary phase, that is also growing. And there are a lot of LPG terminals coming up. Along with the LNG, the LPG terminals are coming up. Mundra, as we have just finished. And now they're coming in Dhamra and Krishnapatnam, and there are a lot. So there are a lot happening in gas. I want to thank all of you to be part of this. And I am sure in next 3 days, you are going to gain a lot from this, and we'll make a lot of business connects, and a lot of business opportunities will be there. One more thing I want to mention here, that this event has grown so much, and the popularity has grown so much. Even Mr. Pradhan was very interested to attend this, and but today a few more people had not come because there was a very, very important meeting came up, and the minister could not travel that. So I thank you once again, organizers, all of you, and the guests on the dais. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to request Mr. Suri to present the mementos to all our guests on the dais. So we'll now have a tea break for 15 minutes, and after that, I request all of you to join us for the next session. We are running a bit late, so I'll request if not to take more than 10 minutes to have your chai and come back. Thank you so much.